Dope Discussions Podcast. Dope discussions, gay to Erica, woke discussions. Mob ties, how they rock and think they both was cousins. Gifting you with their words so you might know you something. Just go and look for them live, they do it every Sunday. Every Sunday.
And we gon' bring you that dope. And we gon' bring you that dope. It's Gator Beat it, baby. Main state to state, baby, coast to coast. Like the fire, baby, spark the jokes. And we gon' bring you that dope. Come talk with Erica, man, talk with G. And all you gotta do is talk with me. And we gon' bring you that dope. And we gon' bring you that dope. And we gon' bring you that dope. And we gon' bring you that dope.
Hey.
I was trying to hit the note.
Oh, you hitting that Bruno Mars.
Just call me Silk Sonic, baby.
How you doing, Gator?
What's going on? What's happening, Erica? Welcome to the virtual congregation, everybody who's tuning in to Dope Discussions today. What's going on, Erica? Usually you always ask me how you doing, but how you doing, Erica?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here. I look forward to every Sunday getting to do another Dope Discussions with Gator Live. This is like my mini therapy session. And then we get to bring in some awesome people that we connected with along the way to have awesome conversations. And today is not going to be any different.
Right. That's the thing that I love. It's kind of a mini therapy session for me too. Every Sunday, get in here. We have some dope conversations with some dope people, and I mean, it's all dope. I gotta stop saying dope for the feds be at my door.
The feds be knocking at your door.
Right, exactly. Like, I'm talking about a podcast. I'm talking about. Yeah.
When I first thought of the name of the show, I kind of wrestled with calling it Dope Discussions because I know back in the day they used to use that word, but today they use a lot of other stuff. And I was like, we're going to be dating ourselves. And then also, I didn't want to kind of associate myself with that word because I used to date dope boys. So I was like, I need to separate myself from that. But I said, I'm going to take the word and I'm going to spin it and make it into a positive thing.
Exactly. Repurpose it. For something.
Yes.
And they had a whole bunch of other people trying to be dope all of a sudden, and I was like, really? This is what we doing.
Right.
We doing things. So yeah, it's not outdated at all. It could be a little controversial, but it's definitely not outdated.
Yes. So at last week we incorporated the music trivia into the show. So I wanted to make sure that you had your song ready, but before you pull your song out, we want to go ahead and bring out our special guest because we want her to be able to participate too, because we're music lovers on this show. and we want to bring our guests in to see if they can participate in the music trivia. So let's bring Miss Bernadette Jackson out. Hey, Bernadette.
Hey, y'all. How you doing?
Good. You're looking beautiful. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Yes, it's so exciting to have a circle of people, like-minded people. You know, we're building a community. I met Bernadette through Derek. I met a lot of awesome people through Derek because Derek be scoping people out.
Right.
He's the plug. He's really the plug.
He is. He's the plug. So yes, that's my boy. And I'm glad we was able to connect with Bernadette. And when I heard her telling some of her story, I was like, this girl is me. And so we got to have a conversation because, you know, when I hear other women who have the same or similar experience, it just makes you feel good that you're not the only one. Yeah. So we are doing, hey, Derek, come on in.
Yeah, there you go right there.
We were just talking about you.
We got to stop talking about dope and plugs and stuff like that. For the
I know, right?
For real.
The Fed's going to shut us down.
Be like, I hear a crackling on my side. You hear that? Sound like somebody talking. You hear that?
Yeah, so we're going to do our music trivia, and then we're going to get Bernadette to introduce herself to the viewers, and we're going to get into the dope discussion today. So music trivia, Gator is going to play a snippet of a song, and then we and the viewers will see if we can guess the name of the song and the artist that sings that song.
All right, so here we go. Let me see. Let's see if y'all can hear this. See if it actually comes up here. Let's see. Let's see. Could y'all hear that?
I did.
I heard it.
Yeah.
I was about to get into it.
Wait a minute. Hold on. That sounds like you know what that is. Hold on.
Yeah, play a little bit more.
I'll play it again right quick. Because as soon as it play past that, you know what it is. Here we go. Just a little bit more.
Oh.
What, hold on. Now, what y'all got? What y'all got for me?
I got nothing. Yeah, I got nothing.
I think here we go, yo. Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario?
Yeah.
Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario? Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario? Hey, yo.
Bo knows this. Bo knows that. Okay, rap. What do you know? Let's not get taken off of YouTube.
Yes, we don't want them to shut us down. Yes. But thank you everybody for joining us again for another Dope Discussions. Our special guest, Miss Bernadette Jackson, is in the house, and she is a strategist and a speaker. She works with fatherless daughters. She has programs and services set up to help ladies who are kind of lost in this life, you know, making bad decisions, you know, bumping their heads up against the wall, all these things that I was doing. And I should have had a you back then, but we was probably going through those things at the same time.
Probably.
So go ahead and introduce yourself. Well, reintroduce yourself because this isn't your first time here, and tell people what your background is and, you know, what you do now.
Okay. So my name is Bernadette. I am a relationship engagement strategist, and I am the host of the Bernadette Jackson podcast. I really want to create an atmosphere where women are safe to learn, to grow, and to heal. And I do that in a few different ways. The podcast is where I kind of just give information on things that I know that we haven't thought about. Sometimes I put a food spin on stuff. Like I used to be a chef, so I love incorporating food culture into what I do with relationships. And I love to really just change the game in terms of how we speak about fatherless daughters. I know that many of the conversations that we have around women with daddy issues is always negative. It's always spoken about as if, like, we're the problem, but there is never any discussion about how we got there. And I know that this discussion is something that needs to be had across the board, because not only do men not understand how we have gotten to the defense mechanisms that we use in relationships, but women who are fatherless daughters also don't understand how they show up and why. And so my platform really is just an education, first for women who are fatherless daughters. And then also I really just hope that men will listen in so that they can kind of get some understanding about like why it is that we do the things that we do. And my hope is that when they do have some understanding about that, that it's met with compassion and empathy and not, with the typical judgment and negativity that it's met with. So, I really just try to redefine how the world views women with daddy issues, usually one episode at a time on my podcast, one post at a time, one conversation like this at a time, and just keep on helping women in different ways with my one-on-one coaching, with my self-paced programs. I'm going to be coming out with a journal soon that's going to help women to get to their most authentic self. I'm really excited about that. So there's a few things that I'm doing, and I'm just hoping that the work that I do reaches some women.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you, Quincy. Welcome on in. So my first question for you, because I want to kind of start at the beginning. What was your childhood like not having your father in your life? Like, what was the age when you recognized that you didn't have a father in your life?
I think I always knew that my father wasn't around. But I had my grandfather because my upbringing rather is Jamaican. So like usually in West Indian homes, it's like multi-generational. So I grew up in like a big house with my mom, with some of my aunts, my grandparents lived there, some of my cousins, stuff like that. So in the beginning, like when I was really young, it was almost like I was always with family. I didn't really notice so much that my father wasn't around. It wasn't until I started to get conversations from him, like he would call randomly on the phone. And when he would call, there would always be conversations about, oh, I want to come and see you and stuff like that. But it never happened. Or it would be like, I'm going to call you next week. And then I wouldn't hear from him for like 10 months. So it's like, it was things like that happened, like the inconsistencies. And because I didn't know what he looked like, I was always imagining that I could have met him on the street and it would have been like some magical thing that would have happened on TV. I was very big into TV, very big in like imagining what it would be like for me to meet my father in some kind of fairy tale kind of way. And I'm like, ooh, what if my father is this guy that kind of looks like me in the Jet magazine? Y'all remember Jet magazine, right? Like,
yes,
Black family had a bunch of Jet magazines in the bathroom for me to material because nobody had cell phones back then. I would look in these Jet magazines and I would see this guy there, and I still remember what he looks like to this day. It was like this light-skinned man with jerry curls. He had a mustache, and I'm like, I wonder if this is my father. Like,
yes,
you know what I mean? It's like stuff like that. And now when I think back to it, I'm like, wow, that was probably trauma. Like truly not knowing what your father looks like and then having to play these kind of games with yourself to make it into something more palatable. Like that was clearly how I was dealing with the fact that why did my father want me around? Why didn't he want to make the effort to come and see me? Why, if he lived only 3.5 hours away, could he never drive down to see me? But talk on the phone about the fact that he wanted to see me. Like it was not adding up. 1 and 2 was just not making 3. It just did not come together. And so I didn't realize when I was younger that, it meant that I was a fatherless child. I didn't really think about all of those things because I was surrounded by family. But once my mom and I moved out into like our own apartment and stuff, and it was just her and I could see very clearly, like, what this was like. And at that point, I feel like I had already had almost like an imaginary world in my mind of what my relationship with him could be like. And I soothed myself with that for a long time. So there was a lot that I did not deal with in terms of how I really felt about it.
Yeah.
And deep down, like, I know now that I felt worthless. I felt like I didn't have any value. I felt like if my father didn't love me and if he didn't want to have a relationship with me, then nobody else would. But I wasn't yet ready to deal with any of that. And so I did a lot of people pleasing, overcompensating for things, trying to prove my worth in relationships, trying to make myself appear perfect, trying to get the best grades in school, trying not to ever mess up, trying to make sure that I was the perfect child to my mom, because I'm like, this is the only parent I have left. I can't lose her too. Like, these are the kinds of things that I thought about all the time. And it played out in my romantic relationships in ways that I had no idea about until I literally had a coming to Jesus moment. And that moment came after I had broken up with the man that I thought that I was going to marry. Like, he and I had some deep history. We had grown up together. We had a really great relationship, but he just wasn't ready. And I don't know what it was about this time, because we had gone down this road before. With the breaking up to the making up. And because we had so much history, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it one more chance. I'm like, I'm going to give it one more time. Okay. And it was like, this time, something just clicked. And I was like, you know what? Like, I can't keep playing this game with you. So after that, I was sitting alone in my apartment on my birthday. None of the people who I had expected to call did. And I was feeling very much in my feelings. And I was like, so nobody cares. And I'm just alone. It's cold. It's January in New York. So, it was frigid outside. And I was just like, this is not cool. I was not feeling it at all. And I started to cry. Like, I was like really devastated, because I was like, why am I here again? I felt like I'm a really good woman. I know that I feel like I'm an excellent girlfriend. I feel like I would make a phenomenal wife. Like, what's up? You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm like, what is really going on? And so I cried out to the Lord. I was like, what's going on here? Like, why do I keep having to deal with this? And I was laying it out for him. I was like, I dated this guy and he cheated, and I dated that guy and he didn't appreciate me, and I dated this guy. And I started going down the list of all of my failed relationships with the Lord. And I was like, what's going on? But because it's not me. Right. It's not me. And you know what the Lord said to me? He gathered me up and he was like, daughter, let me tell you something. You're the common denominator in all your failed relationships. And I was like, okay, you know what? That was unnecessary.
Thank you. I didn't come to you for that.
That was below the belt and uncalled for. Okay.
Yes.
And I was like, I really felt like, you know what you did there? Like, I felt like you sucker punched me. I wasn't ready for that. You knew I was already down. You didn't need to kick me. None of that was called for. Like, it wasn't. I don't know what you did that. You could have waited till tomorrow or 2 days from now when I gathered myself a little bit. You'd have given me that revelation then, but no.
Let me have my pity party, please.
Okay, something. But it happened and I had to sit with it. And in doing that, like, I really did understand that everything that was said in that moment was true. Like, that revelation was absolutely true. I was the common denominator. And until then, I had not taken responsibility for what I actually had control over, which was the type of men that I was choosing, what I was choosing to accept, what I was doing, the way in which that I would self-abandon, the things that I was neglecting, all of these things I was doing to my own self, and I was responsible for that. And so
Yes.
just in learning all of that, I realized that every single guy that I had named to the Lord and asked him why those relationships didn't work, those men were just as emotionally unavailable as my father was. And it wasn't until
Mm.
that moment that I realized that I was accepting what was familiar in relationships, which were men like my father, and not what I deserved, which is what I truly yearned for. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I finally made that like revelation, I decided I needed to get radical about my healing, radical about implementing some new systems, some new ways of communicating and just showing up differently. And so I spent about 3 years where I really just like I had my head down. I call that my time when I was in the lab. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
doing my research, I was reading, I was journaling, I was praying, I was getting super clear about how my father and the relationship that we did not have was showing up in all of my relationships that I wanted to work. And I can
Yes.
see now why they wouldn't work, because what I yearned for was to be deeply seen, to be understood, to be loved, to be
Mm-hmm.
supported. And none of that was happening with men who are emotionally unavailable. So those relationships needed to end. But
Yes.
until I got clear about what the connection was between my father's absence and the way I showed up in relationships and the types of partners that I chose and what I allowed to happen and what I abandoned in myself, like all of
Mm-hmm.
those things, I had to learn all of that before I can start showing up authentically and being okay with making mistakes and being
Yes.
okay with telling people exactly what I needed and asking for help and just like, attracting different partners. And even if I attracted men who were like the men that I used to date, understanding that that's not where I wanted to be. So saying no instead of
Mm-hmm.
looking at somebody who had interest in me being, well, let me just try it out and see if this time is going to be different. So it's like I
Right.
had to do a whole mindset shift. I had to recalibrate so many things. I had to unlearn all of the coping and defense mechanisms I learned. There was so much that I did in that 3 years. And I calculated
Mm.
everything. Like I wrote it
Wow.
all down. It was like I was in the lab for real. I was writing down hypotheses like, okay, if I do this and this in this relationship, let's see what's going to happen. And I started playing with formulas. I started doing all the things, y'all. Like seriously. I promise you, like at the end of those 3 years, like I learned so much about myself, so much about fatherless daughters in general. And I really had like a system of how I can do things differently. And I felt really confident. And I started to kind of share that with people like, hey, let me tell you this thing that I learned about, XYZ over here. And in doing that, I realized that there was so many more fatherless daughters out there than I noticed. Like we've been
Ooh.
out here like in the cut hiding out, not wanting
Yes.
anybody to know like, we are struggling with this deep hurt. And it wasn't
Ooh.
until I started to get vocal about like what happened to me, what I noticed, what I saw, the trends that I was seeing and all the patterns and all that, that people
Mm-hmm.
started to come forward like, wow, that's me too. I didn't know that and what have you. Like I had no idea. I thought about what you said and I realized that's me too. And that's when I realized I needed to do something, because
Yes.
the one thing that I noticed about everything that I was doing in those 3 years, I looked for resources specifically for me. I was
Right.
like, where are the resources for fatherless daughters? There was one book, y'all, one book when I was doing this work. There's a
Wow.
few more now. There's people like, really speaking to it now. But there
Yeah.
was one book, and this book was written by two white women. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
telling you, like, it was very helpful, but there was nobody like me that I can
Right.
see and I can look at, like, I can identify with her. I know her story. I would feel comfortable with her, like, digging into my life or
Right, right.
none of that. So I
Wow.
knew that at the end of me, like, really getting to a place where I could help somebody else with this, the
Mm-hmm.
Lord tapped me on the shoulder, like, it's you. I want you to do this work. And so I just like, I've been doing what I need to do since then, and I've really been enjoying it. But it took some time, and I'm still on the journey. Still on the journey.
Yeah. It's a day-to-day journey.
Yes.
When
Yeah.
listening to you say all that was just like a recall of my whole experience. And I thought back when you were saying how you would fantasize about your father and who he was and what he looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember as a child, I created this whole fantasy life for myself. And I always held on to the hope that my dad was going to come in and save me one day.
Me too.
Always held on to that. And so
Mm-hmm.
that made me develop this romanticized idea about how relationships are supposed to work. And in all of my relationships, I was so on such a deep level attracted to the emotionally unavailable men. I would be approached by guys who were willing to be open to me and willing to treat me the way I'm supposed to be treated in a healthy way. But I wasn't attracted to those kind of guys. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted the one that was hard to get, the one that I had to chase down and prove that I was worthy. And I never understood that was because I was trying to get the validation from my dad. Like, why did you not want to be my dad? Like, why did you knew where I was? Like, my father
Mm-hmm.
lived like 20 minutes away from me. And like you said, he would call and say he was coming to get me. That day would never come. He would do it again, set me up for failure, and I would get my hopes up, and then that day would never come. And then I think I might have been maybe 11 or 12, and I just told myself, and this is the story that I started to tell myself to help me, was that you don't need a father.
Mm.
You've been without a father all these years. You've been doing good without one. You don't need one. And then I just started to play this. I became fiercely independent, to where if anything ever needed to be done in my life, if I ever needed to count on anybody, it would only be me.
Mm-hmm.
And at an
Mm-hmm.
early age, I became fiercely independent. I wouldn't let anybody do anything for me. If I needed help or if I was in pain, I wouldn't tell anybody. I would just
Mm-hmm.
go about my business and figure it out on my own. And I showed up like that in relationships and couldn't understand of why I couldn't get the love that I wanted. Inside, I was yearning for it, but on the outside, I was portraying like I didn't need anybody or I didn't need anything. And
Yeah.
so I became my own worst enemy in that way.
Yeah. I completely resonate with everything you're saying. Even as you were talking, where you were like, you were attracted to and dating men who you had to prove your worth to. I'm thinking in my mind, and I bet you that you was hoping for them to be the white knight that you always wanted your father to be.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I'm like,
Yes.
you praying for them to just be like, okay, I just want you to save me. I just
Yes.
want you to tell me how much you love me and that you're never going to leave me and that you're going to be the person that I always wanted my father to be. And I'm
Hmm.
telling you, like, this is exactly what it was like for me. I watched so many romance movies, I read so many books. I used to love the books by Eric Jerome Dickey because they always had a black man in that role playing some kind of savior. And I'm like, that's gonna be my man. Like, yeah,
Yes.
that kind of guy is going to come and save me. And
Hmm.
I used to always say things to myself like, you know what, if I'm having an argument with my boyfriend and, he decides that he's going to leave and I'm sitting in this apartment waiting for him to come back, if this man does not come back the way Richard Gere did in Pretty Woman and come save me from my balcony, I promise you that man does not love me. He
Right.
doesn't. Really and truly, like those were the relationship expectations that I had for
Yes.
too long. Just out
Do
here
you
in the
think that?
trenches.
Do you think that's a common denominator for girls who grow up without a father? Is we have this deep desire to be rescued?
I believe that we do because honestly, like our fathers are supposed to be the first example of what feeling covered and protected is by a man. And I feel like a lot of us will not experience that if our mother has not remarried, and if, our stepfather or some kind of male figure has not taken up that role. And so if we've never seen that, if we've never seen healthy relationships with anybody in our home, we're really going to have to decipher for ourselves what healthy relationships looks like. And a lot of it is going to be based on the movies that we see, the books that we read, because that's the closest thing to what relationships were. And that's really what we've been indoctrinated with, like from a child, fairy tales. The woman is always at the end getting the guy living happily ever after. And that's really what we believe relationships are like, because we don't have anything real and tangible to put up against that, to see like, oh, this isn't really what relationships are like. So a lot of us really do want to be rescued. And I feel like the way in which we want to be rescued is that we want for the person in our life to tell us that they're not going to abandon us like our father did. They're not going to reject us, even if we decide to come to the table broken. If we decide to say, hey, like, these are my wounds, this is where I hurt, this is what I've been struggling with, this is how I really feel, this is me being my most vulnerable self, you're not going to be like, oh, I can't take that, I'm sorry, like, I gotta go, bye. Like, that's what fatherless daughters really want. That is the kind of white knight treatment that we're looking for. And we don't understand how to show up as our most authentic self, because we're so used to people leaving. And we have this idea that because our father wasn't there, then other people will leave just like he did. So we have learned how to be the most acceptable versions of ourselves where people won't leave us. And a lot of times that is not who we really are. This is a mask that we put on daily, and we know how to wear that mask because we've been wearing it since we were a kid. You know what I mean? And like, we just learned how to perfect this way of being, where we are going to be liked by other people, where nobody is going to be able to leave us or reject us. And we tweak it. Like, if we show up a little bit, like, oh, wow, you laughing a little bit too loud, I bet you we won't laugh loud like that again. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you talk about our clothes, you talk about our hair. I'm telling you right now, that's going to change, because we want to tweak it until we can get to the version of ourselves that people most can like, most can accept. And that's what we start to show up as. And because we do it so long, and we're so just entrenched in wanting to please the people around us because we don't want anyone else to leave, we have forgotten who we are at our core. So our most authentic self, the one where if we actually show that, then the people that we actually want to be in relationship with will be able to deeply see us, which is actually our deepest desire. That has become like a secret identity that we only take off, we only expose to like maybe one or two people, and likely our girlfriends. You know what I mean? Not no man. And we keep that version of ourselves in the closet, never to be seen, never to be heard of, but still wanting to be deeply known by people. And it's like, it's like this conundrum, because it's like you're not showing up as your most authentic self, which is the easiest way for somebody to deeply know you. You have this mask on. You don't know how to take it off because you don't want to be rejected if you do. And being rejected for being your most authentic self with all that we've already been through is a trauma again. And so it's like, that's not the kind of vulnerability that we feel strong enough really to put ourselves through. But we have to get to a place, and this is where healing comes in, where we can say, I'm going to show up as my most authentic self, and I'm going to be okay if people decide that I'm not for them. Because people deciding that is not an indictment against my character, is not a strike against my value or my worth. And I'm okay if people don't want to be in my life, because I have gotten to the place where I want to show up this way. I'm okay with being this way. I don't need to be perfect. And in doing this, I know that the right people are going to be drawn to me, and those people will deeply know me. And then I will have the kind of connectedness that I have always wanted to have. So that right there is really where the healing comes in. And that's what I try to get my clients to come to.
You just preached a whole sermon. Jada, get in there.
Definitely. I was sitting there and I was just listening to you. But I do want to take it back just a little bit. And there's a reason for that because this is a two-part question. So you talked about earlier in your childhood where you just kind of went into your own fantasy world about who your father was and what he was doing and those things like that. Was there ever any real conversations in the households? I know you came from a household where you had a grandfather. It was in the household, but were there any conversations directly with you about your father not being there and why he wasn't there? And the second part of that question, and this is the reason why I asked it, the second part of the question is when you're dealing with women right now who may be going through a scenario where their kids are possibly in an absentee father situation, how do you counsel them and how to relay that to their kids currently?
That's a good question. So there wasn't any talk about my father not being there. In Jamaican homes, everything is very hush hush. They don't talk about issues like that. And even if they did speak about it, that's not the kind of conversations that they would have with children. They really believe that children are to be seen and not heard. And so that's the culture that I grew up in. And I cannot remember ending a conversation with my father and my mom having a discussion with me about him not doing something he said he was going to do. And I know now that my mom saw that as protecting me. She didn't want to tell me that what he said on the phone was never going to happen because she knew. She didn't want to speak badly about him or anything like that. So her silence was her protecting me. And I believe it was also her trying to allow me to have my own opinions and to be able to form them based on my experience and not it to be colored by something that she said based on what she knew. So that's the way that she knew how to deal with it. And this was uncharted territory because she grew up in a two-parent home.
Right.
So none of this was this wasn't ever modeled for her. And I think that she really was trying to do the honorable thing. So I didn't really get any questions answered about that, which is why my imagination life and just this world that I've created was so vivid. And because I didn't want to ask the questions. I didn't want to hear that's not your business, or, don't ask those questions, or go and sit down, just go sit down. I didn't hear none of that. So I just imagined what could possibly be it. If I wanted to talk to my father, I'd have an imaginary conversation in my mind with him, where I would be we're going to your house in Boston. And I think I imagined he lived in a castle. I'm all these things, when I was younger, so it was a very rich life this man had, and so, I feel I think she did the best she could, honestly. We've had several conversations as an adult, and I know now what her mindset was and where she was going with that. But if I have a client who has a daughter who's also a fatherless daughter, and I actually did have a client like this, the first thing that I asked her was whether or not she had any men in her life that could step up as a male mentor for her daughter. Because I know that the desire was that she wanted her daughter's father to be in her life, but he did not want to, and she could not force him. And so she had conversations with her daughter, and I believe they were maybe on the tone of your daddy is really busy right now, but he still loves you and he's going to come and see you as soon as he can. But Uncle so-and-so is going to call you this week and you guys can have a conversation and blah, blah, blah. So there was always telling her as much as she could, because her daughter, I believe, is maybe 7 now, but still redirecting her with the idea that there's going to be someone who's going to fill that gap for you, who absolutely is going to call. And these are men that you already vetted, men who had already promised to step up and showed her over time that they weren't lying about that. And, their word was their bond. So there was that. If there is a situation where that's not something that the mother has access to, there aren't any male figures that maybe she can have around her daughter, what I would say is to be honest about what's happening with the relationship with the daughter's father, and honestly to ask her how she feels about it. I
Right,
feel like a
right.
lot of parents do not give their children the opportunity to have the emotions that they have, and then teach them how to deal with them, like how to process them and whatnot. And so asking your daughter, if you're a mom who's in this situation, asking your daughter how she feels about her father not being there, and do it like, when I guess maybe when a situation arises, because you will notice like your daughter's attitude may change a little bit. Let's say if she's in a park and she sees like a father and a daughter together playing, and she realizes that she has never had that experience, and you may see like, her mood change or something. You
Mhm.
can ask your daughter how she feels at that time, and wait for her to respond, and then
Mhm.
tell her like, what she can do when that kind of thing happens, so that she can self-soothe. Because the
Mhm.
one thing that we need to learn how to do is to not ignore our feelings, not to retreat into ourselves, but to find healthy ways to self-soothe. And self-nurturing is something that I don't really think we were taught as children. And so we don't really understand how to teach our children how to be nurturing to their own self first. And
Mhm.
so if we can really just learn how to do that and teach our children those kind of skills, then when big emotions come up, they will understand what they can do in the face of those emotions, instead of retreating into themselves or ignoring it, or doing something that is dangerous or unhealthy to try and distract them from not dealing with what they feel. So that's what I would say to that.
Right.
Good. We got some
Oh yeah.
comments out here that I want to address right quick before we move on. Quincy from Talk to Q radio show, he had a question. What was it like to realize that other kids have their dads in their lives when you don't yourself?
That's a really good question. For me, it's not something that I dwelled on that much, because I was in my own world, and I
Mhm.
really was just trying to be like the best kid that I could. I had a stepfather at some point. He was just as emotionally unavailable as my father was. I didn't know that at the time,
Yeah.
because at least he was in the home, and I was like, oh well, at least there's a father here. So it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that, okay, this man was really just as emotionally unavailable. So it was almost a distraction that I had a father, like a stepfather, at some point. So I never really had the experience of comparing myself to other people who didn't have like dads in their home, or who had dads rather. This is not something that I realized until I actually had that coming to Jesus moment, where I kind of got knocked on the head with that piece of information. That was really when things kind of clicked into place for me.
Yeah. For me, I grew up in a really rural community, and it was all family. Like my uncles and cousins and aunties, we all lived on the same street, so we were all raised together, and everybody else had a two-parent household except me. And so I felt different. But I gravitated toward my uncles, and they became like, father figures in my life. But I still had that void, because I was like, this is not my dad, and this is my cousin's father. I can borrow him for a little while, but I don't get to live with him. And men became like an enigma to me, like a mystery to me. I wanted to study men and understand them, to try to maybe understand my father better in his absence. And so I became like the ultimate people pleaser. Whatever men liked, I would morph into that to be accepted and to get attention. My favorite uncle, his name is Henry, Uncle Henry, and he was my favorite uncle. And he used to love basketball. So I joined the basketball team because I felt like he would be proud of me for playing basketball. And I didn't notice that's what I was doing at the time. I look back on it now and understand it. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's craziness. I mean, when you sit there and you think about how much the trauma can be from, and I can look at it from a male perspective, of course, because I'm a male, I'm a man.
Hmm.
So it's amazing when I can see how it affects women. We always are taught, and sometimes we're pushed, that narrative is pushed, that as a little boys need their fathers in the home, because if not, we're gonna go awry and we're gonna end up in the streets and it's gonna be trouble. But it's amazing just listening to the conversation that I'm listening to right now, how much of an effect it is to on young girls to not have that father figure in the home. Now, I mentioned before too, before we were backstage, about a scenario where you do have a father there, and maybe they're emotionally unavailable. How can that cause that? Does it cause that same trauma, or are there different factors that might, or different things, the reactions that may come up from that?
That's a really great question. So, when I talk about fatherlessness, I talk about it as being on a spectrum where, on one end of the spectrum, your father is absent completely, and on the other side of the spectrum, you have a father that is in your home, that is emotionally available. Now, in between those two, we do have the father that's in the home that's emotionally unavailable, and that woman is likely going to be a person who seeks out validation and attention, good or bad, from anyone who will give it to her. That's the number one thing that women whose fathers were in the home but emotionally unavailable are going to do. And because a lot of it is that they want to understand why their father is not curious about them, why their father does not see them, why do they feel ignored by their father. And so, because they want that attention, they will go and find that elsewhere. And
Hmm.
it could be something as simple as, oh, wow, you have on a really pretty dress. And immediately their head is turned and their nose is wide open, and they can just be swayed to do a number of things just off of something as simple as a compliment from a man, because
Hmm.
immediately there's like this switch on that says, oh, wow, he noticed me. Okay, so if he noticed me, I wonder if he likes me. I wonder what he likes. I wonder what I have to do to get a compliment from him again, or more attention from him again. And these are the kinds of things that, a lot of women who have fathers in the home, a, a lot of them don't even realize that they're fatherless daughters. I'm just going to put that out
Mm.
there in the atmosphere. Like, my father was at home, and yes, this man watched TV when he got home. Yes, he worked like, 70 hours a week, blah, blah, blah. But, he was in the home. So I'm not a fatherless daughter. Mind you, like,
Hmm.
their father does not know them. You could ask this man questions about his own daughter. He would not be able to answer them. You can
Mm.
ask her, when was the last time she had a conversation with her father where she felt like she was seen by him, where she felt understood or supported. That may not have been the case. So
Mm.
it is still a trauma, because it's almost as if, you're wondering, why am I living in this place? Why do I have a father in the home, but there's no relationship there? It's almost like you being in a romantic relationship with somebody and you know that they don't know you. Like, that,
Yes.
there's things about you that they are not curious about. They don't ask you any questions about yourself to know them. You're like watching them and observing them and trying to, maneuver yourself around the things that they like. You realize like, oh, he really likes tea in the morning. Let me get him some tea. But they don't know nothing about you. Like, that is what it's like
Mm.
when your father is not intentional about his relationship with you. And so those women deeply yearn to be seen, and deeply yearn to just have some kind of attention from men. And they will
Hmm.
do whatever they deem necessary to get that attention, good and bad. So that's what I've noticed about
Mm.
women who deal with that. And it mimics a lot of the experiences that women whose father was not in the home at all have. Like,
Hmm.
those two are almost one and the same. And it's funny because one, the father is not there at all, and the other one, the father is, and yet they have very, very similar experiences because of the void of emotional unavailability still being there.
Yeah. Hey Ursula, there's Ursula
Hey.
from Black Girls Getting their shift together, and I've heard her speak about this a lot. Her father was
Mm-hmm.
actually in the home, but he was emotionally unavailable, and it
Mm-hmm.
was the same effect. And
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that there's probably another layer on top of that because people from the outside looking in would look at that situation and say, at least you
Yeah.
did have your father at home,
Right, right.
and they
Yes.
would kind of downplay
Mm-hmm.
their trauma and say
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
their situation was better than other people, not
Right.
understanding that it's really not.
It really
Right.
isn't. And then the fact that it's being downplayed like that, that is then teaching that fatherless daughter that she can't even like, be real about how she
Hmm.
feels about things. And it
Hmm.
teaches her to, like hide her emotions and to keep her those kinds of experiences to herself and to not tell people when she's hurting. And so she then begins to believe that vulnerability is not an option for her.
Hmm.
And it's synonymous with weakness. And so
Yes.
she always has to be strong and she
Right.
always has to show up as like never nothing is ever wrong with her. And she has to just see like, try to deal with her issues in silence. And a lot of it is going to look like her just ignoring it and
Right.
really just trying to do things to distract herself. And this is where sometimes we have like, trauma-based responses where you're doing things that you're trying to use to distract yourself from how you're feeling instead
Mm.
of dealing with it. And so
Hmm.
there's so many different things that can happen with that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of
Mm.
situations where you have a young girl who has both parents in the home, but she's acting out. She's being sexually promiscuous, and
Mhm.
Mm.
people are judging her and saying she comes from a good home. Why is she
Right.
acting like that? And they
Right.
don't understand the dynamics of that household. They're just judging her and saying that she's got the best opportunities and she
Mhm.
still chose to throw it away and turn out bad and do bad things, and
Right.
not understanding what the dynamics are in there.
Right. And
Exactly.
I imagine like even the father in that home would probably be trying to figure out what's going on as well. Because even in
Mhm.
speaking to a lot of men, like a lot of older men really do have the idea that just being there, like being
Mm-hmm.
present, paying the bills, coming home every night is enough for them to be the father in the home. And there is no intentionality in terms of their relationship with their daughter, and they don't understand that there needs to be more than just their presence in the home.
Mhm.
So it's very hard to explain to some older people that yes, my father was in the home, but I never felt seen by him. I didn't have a relationship with him. I didn't think that he was interested in anything that I did. And
Mhm.
I tried to do everything in my power to get this man's attention. Like you were saying, you play basketball, and young girls will
Mm-hmm.
do this. They will do whatever they can to get their father's attention. And it'll be like, oh, okay, sweetheart, little pat on the head
Mhm.
and nothing. And it's like that kind of disappointment over and over and over again
Mhm.
really trains her to really try and be hyper focused on what do people outside of myself need in order for me to be seen by them, and be putting themselves in situations even to their own detriment to be
Hmm.
seen and to be like validated by people, and just having to have these kind of like these experiences of getting these accolades or people finally seeing me and people like congratulating me and whatnot, and doing this over and over and over again. And how far can I go with this? Maybe if I get
Right.
a doctorate, my father will finally see me. Like maybe if
Yes.
I get a raise and I'm running the company, will he see me now? If I do this and that, and they use accomplishments, and they use like
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
different kinds of things to get attention. Like some people will go to the sex and some people will go to the relationships, but other people will go as far as accomplishment after accomplishment after accomplishment after
Mm-hmm.
accomplishment, hoping that this one is going to be the one that my father
Mhm.
is finally going to see me and I'm going to get the recognition that I have always wanted from him. And not
Mhm.
realizing that, this drive that they have is because of there is a traumatic experience experience that they have not yet processed, and they've been using these accomplishments to prove that they're worthy. And this is the same kind of attitude that they take in relationships. And meanwhile, men want you soft. They want to know what can you do outside of these accomplishments. I don't give a damn up that you a doctor. Like, they don't, they can't know. They do not care. But you're leading in relationships with that information because you are hoping that your dad was the one who saw you and, like, you know, did something, and he didn't. And you thinking that this is the thing that's going to attract this man. Mind you, you're showing up in all this masculine energy. He does not care, sis. He doesn't. And it's like, it needs to be like, you just have to unlearn all of that. And it's so hard because everything is tangled up, and it's really hard to get to the root of that, but it's necessary work.
Yes.
Right.
So do you think that the reason that you know, the issue, the phrase daddy issues has such a negative connotation is because fatherless daughters go into relationships with unrealistic expectations, and they want their partner to fill in all the gaps from their childhood?
I think that plays a really big part in it. I feel like a lot of fatherless daughters who have not yet gone through the process of healing from that, they bring their wounding into relationships. They bring their fear-based responses. They bring their defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms into relationships with them. And they don't understand, again, that being their most authentic self and really just coming to the table and saying, listen, like, there are some things that I did not receive growing up, and I know for a fact that they may show up in this relationship in some way. But what I can promise you is that I'm aware of it. I am working through it. And when it comes, I will let you know what's going on so that you and I are on the same page. Just saying that alone, as vulnerable as it may feel, saying that alone is going to give your man the opportunity to support you when you need support. And I really feel like fatherless daughters are afraid to be vulnerable because they have had so many experiences with people not being there, not showing up, with leaving, with feeling like they've been abandoned. And because they have had these kind of experiences over and over again, and because they attract what's familiar, so they're going to continue to attract people who do these same kinds of things, they feel like they cannot be their most authentic self and cannot actually show people what's really going on and ask for help. And so when we have the whole connotation of women with daddy issues, and a lot of it is like, oh, you know, she may want an older man, or she may want this person to take care of her and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with a woman desiring a man to be a covering. Let's be clear about that.
Right.
You know, like, we need to discuss, well, what is the intention behind it? And, you know, like, how is she also going to contribute to the dynamic in the relationship? Those are conversations we can have alongside it. But there's nothing wrong with a woman wanting her man to be a covering, because that is what men were really conditioned to do. Like, a lot of us, you know, want to kind of fall into these roles where we feel most comfortable. And if a man feels most comfortable as a provider and protector, let him do that. The thing with fatherless daughters is that they have not experienced that. And so because they have not had any visual representation of what that looks like, it's foreign to us. And I can say, I can put myself in that bucket too. It's very foreign, you know? And so when we experience this, we do not know what to do. And because we don't know what to do, this is where sometimes the self-sabotage comes in, you know? Like, this is where you feeling like, oh, I don't deserve this because this has never happened before. I've never seen it. I'm not worthy. My father wasn't there. How I know that this guy is going to come in and stay? You know what I mean? Like, so all of these kinds of things really come up in our mind. And because this is unfamiliar territory, our brain does not know what to do with these new emotions, with this feeling, with, you know, this new environment. And so our brain is sitting up here trying to put put this into a box that we've already experienced, and there's something new that needs to be created. But because we don't have the skills to understand how to handle relationships like this, we're bringing our fear-based responses into relationships that could have been amazing. We're
Yes.
like all of our triggers and, you know, our past experiences, and thinking that this new person who may want to be exactly what we've always wanted is going to do the same thing that everyone else did. And so instead of saying, hey, this is uncharted territory, I don't really know how to handle this, and I'm a little afraid, what ends up happening is that you treat that man who wants to treat you exactly the way you have always wanted to be treated, just like these fools that you've been dating all this time. And now you're responding to him with the same kind of fear-based responses that you responded to everyone else. And this man is not going to take that, because he's trying to love you. He's trying to protect you. He's trying to be the provider and all that, and you won't let him. And I'm not saying that it's a fatherless daughter's fault. But what I will say is that when you realize that anything that I've said or any of these conversations that we're having, this sounds like you now have a responsibility to figure out what you're going to do about this. Because I know for a fact that what you want is to be in the kind of relationship where you feel safe enough to bring your most authentic self to, where you can tell the person that you're in a relationship with, hey, this happened to me, this is what's going on, and I don't know yet how I feel about this, but at least I want to be able to discuss this with you, and let's see if we can get to something. You know what I mean? Like even the start of a conversation, even just saying that alone will at least help your man to understand how he can support you and what he can do. And having these kind of conversations as things come up is going to give you the kind of experience that it's going to negate what you have experienced before. And I speak about this all the time, that healing is not something that you do alone. Healing happens in community with others. And you have to have the kinds of experiences that negate what you have experienced before, the thing that originally caused the trauma, in order for your healing to take root. It can't just be theoretical in your mind. You have to have what's called disaffirming experiences in order for the healing to take root. And that's when you experience things are the opposite of what the trauma that caused all those defense mechanisms actually happened inside of you. You have to have experiences that are opposite of that, because the two go hand in hand. You work on yourself, but then you get into community with other people that show you that, hey, the thing that happened to you before is not the only kinds of relationships that you will be in. And so I want to show you a different way. And in having these new relationships with people where you're being honest, you know, you're making the decision to show up authentically. You're telling people if you're scared about something or this is new, you know, you need a little help with this and stuff like that. And they actually help you with those things. They actually walk alongside you as you're healing. That is when true healing starts to take root, because the two have to go hand in hand.
Ooh, Jesus. You want to get back in there, Gator?
No, that was a good parting shot right there. Look, I'm not.
Yes, community is important. And
Definitely.
so often, and I know I've been guilty of this, where I've isolated and gotten by myself and thought that I was doing my own healing, but I wasn't. I wasn't, because I can't function in a world solo. I have to know how I show up out in the world, in community, and in relation with other people, to know if I'm really healing or not, or if I'm just fooling myself.
Right.
And honestly, like you have to use your new skills like in the field. You know what I mean? Like it can't just be on paper. If you don't use them, then how are you going to know if this is actually what you need and if this is going to work for you? So you have to be out there.
Yes. Ursula says she's running across the church.
Oh, Lord.
Yes.
Get back to your station, Senior
Get back
Usher.
to your station, Usher.
supposed to be helping everybody when they pass out.
Man, this has been phenomenal. I thank you
yeah.
so much, Bernadette, for blessing us with your presence, with your knowledge, with your experience. Can you kind of tell the people, the viewers, how they can get in contact with you, what services you offer, how you help women present day?
Of course, yeah. So you can reach me on IG. That's where I'm the most active, at Bernadette N. Jackson. And when I have clients, I do one-on-one coaching with women where I walk alongside them and we really dive deep into how their father story has affected them in relationships and connect the dots between what that was like as a child and how they're showing up. And in those types of scenarios with women, what I end up doing is we give them some new skills. So we teach them how to communicate more effectively. We teach them how to do a lot of things that we did not learn as children, and we likely don't learn as adults. I am always telling people that relationships is not something that you just magically know because you're now an adult. You have to work at it. And so I do teach a lot of that in one-on-one coaching. I do also have a self-paced program. And if you want to really get a taste of what it's like to be in any kind of working relationship with me, I would say the first thing that you can do is go and look at the free training that I have called How to Conduct a Relationship Autopsy. If you go to my IG bio, you will see that that's the first link there. And it is going to be a training. It's a free training for you to teach you how to find the patterns in your own relationships that you may not see. And I like to call it a relationship autopsy because a lot of us do not sit down and really decide or figure out rather what has happened when a relationship ends. We're just so quick to like get into the new one and just, like get out there again. But if we kind of do just a little bit of a dig and see like, well, what happened here? What can I learn from this? How does this look against all of my other relationships? You'll start to see patterns. And when you notice those patterns, that's where the real work begins. And so I teach clients how to do that in that free training. You're welcome to go and look at that. And just hit me up in the DMs if you want to talk as well. I love engaging with people. So you can hit me up on IG. You can follow me on IG. You can also go to my podcast, the Bernadette Jackson podcast. I like to talk about a lot of things over there. So you can also engage there. And you'll find the links to everything in my bio on IG. That's up on the screen.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you again. And this will not be the last time we have you on Dope Discussions.
Definitely. Like
you
John
have blessed
said,
us today.
Up and know how dope Bernadette is.
Oh, thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Yes, she is so dope. Yes, I love it. Man, this has been another Dope Discussion Sunday with our special guest, Bernadette N. Jackson. Please, y'all go connect with her on Instagram at Bernadette N. Jackson. Click that link and get that autopsy, that relationship autopsy. Figure out where you are and where you want to go. And she will definitely get you there.
That's right.
Yes. Until next time, everybody, it's been dope. You got any parting words,
everybody?
Skater?
Hey, no, just want to thank Bernadette for coming on here and dropping them nuggets, like you were saying, dropping them little golden bombs to everybody. I think this is going to actually be helpful for a lot of people, all of the 300 that joined us during the show and all the people that are going to be on the replays. If you're on the replay, make sure you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe. And hey, this message is the same today as it is tomorrow, as it is the day after. Make sure you share that out to everybody that you know. No matter when you're viewing this video, know that we are trying to give you that dope. So till we see you later, man. I'm excited. I like it.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.